Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories this hour. After 3 hours of talks in Alaska, Trump says they didn't get there on a Ukraine agreement. Vladimir Putin insists he is sincerely interested in ending the war, but offers no details as both leaders avoid questions. President Zelensky announces he will meet Donald Trump in Washington on Monday. He posted on Telegram that he is grateful for the invitation amid fresh diplomatic efforts after the Alaska summit. Ukraine confirms President Zelensky held a long conversation with Donald Trump, later joined by European leaders, including UK PM Keir Starmer, after he was excluded from the Trump-Putin Alaska summit. Donald Trump calls the summit with Putin a 10 out of 10, saying they are pretty close to a deal that could include prisoner exchanges. He warns one big thing still blocks a ceasefire and urges Zelensky to make a deal. Spokesman Dmitry Peskov says the leaders made exhaustive statements and there was no need for questions after the summit. He adds their discussions will help them confidently move forward towards a peace settlement. Now on the battlefield, Ukraine says Moscow launched 85 drones and a ballistic missile overnight, just hours after Putin and Trump's talks ended without a ceasefire deal. Kiev reports shooting down 61 drones as strikes hit 4 frontline regions. In South Asia, rescuers are pulling bodies from debris after torrential rains triggered flash floods across northern Pakistan. Authorities say at least 321 people have died as the monsoon season batters the region. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi will visit India from Monday to Wednesday for discussions on the disputed Himalayan frontier. It will be only the second such meeting since the deadly 2020 clash between the two sides. Now our top story of the day. Hours after the Alaska summit ended, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and US President Donald Trump have confirmed that the Ukrainian president will be coming to DC on Monday afternoon to meet the US president. Trump has also said that if the meeting works out, then they will schedule a meeting with the Russian president. This comes after Zelensky confirmed that he held a call with Trump and European Union leaders lasting over an hour and a half. In the teleconference, they discussed positive signals from US on security guarantees and Europe's involvement in any future talks. Zelensky said that Ukraine is ready for constructive cooperation while supporting a trilateral format for peace discussions. According to Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, the meeting concluded with them working on a joint statement on the way forward. Meanwhile, Trump reportedly told Zelensky and the European leaders that Russian President Vladimir Putin does not seek a ceasefire, preferring a comprehensive agreement to end the war. Trump reportedly also said that a fast peace deal is better than a ceasefire. We're now joined by Keith Vaz, who is a former UK minister. He joins us live from London to discuss this ever-developing situation. Keith, your reaction to the news that President Zelensky will visit Washington on Monday, and also some positive developments coming out of a call with European leaders, along with the Ukrainian president, directly after this meeting with President Putin.
Good morning, Thomas, from London. I think that this is a very positive development. I am very excited about what is going on. We all seem to be living through a most remarkable period in our history where you don't have to go through diplomatic circles. Leaders can get together, have discussions, shake hands, and make deals. This is what makes the Trump administration so fascinating. It is a roller coaster ride because you don't know what's going to happen in the end. But this ever-moving story is something that we should all welcome enormously. First of all, I think most of the world would regard the meeting with President Putin and Trump as being a bit of a letdown. I think people were expecting a ceasefire at the end of it. At the press conference, the press were expecting the chance to put questions and get answers from the leaders. None of that happened. But the fact that the meeting took place is, I think, more important than the outcome of the meeting. Because otherwise you can go around in circles, you can send special envoys, you can make sure that you have your secretaries of state and your foreign ministers out there. But at the end, the decision will be made by these two men. So even though I think everyone's disappointed and opponents of President Trump will say, you didn't get your ceasefire, the fact of the meeting is so critical. I think the fact that he's then phoned President Zelensky immediately and asked him to come to Washington on Monday is also very welcome, because he could have said, now it's up to you. You and President Putin need to meet. I will brief you over the telephone, and you both of you should meet and discuss how to take matters forward. And I'm out of it. I've broken the ice. I've not broken the deal, but I'm out of it. He then had to speak to his European leaders. You see, what the President of the United States has that the President of Russia doesn't have, at least at this moment, Thomas, is that he has allies. He's got all the European countries. He's got, obviously, Ukraine, and he's got other countries beyond that. President Putin has nobody on his side of the chessboard of that significance except himself. Of course, there's India and China, but they're not going to be part of this. This is not their war.
Yes.
So they're going to be off camera. So this is a very, very important development.
Yes, Keith. Donald Trump hasn't spoken to any reporters like he usually does since finishing this meeting with Vladimir Putin. However, we have got the news, of course, that Zelensky is going to Washington. But he did say also that he says that Vladimir Putin doesn't seek a ceasefire. And he says he prefers that he prefers a comprehensive agreement to end the war. Do you find this at all worrying? Is the Russian president perhaps buying time?
I think it's very worrying, because that's the number one item on the agenda of both President Zelensky and President Trump, a ceasefire. I don't see how, in diplomatic circles, you can get an agreement, a comprehensive agreement, without a ceasefire. So basically, you're saying, we carry on fighting until we agree what's at the end, but we don't know what's at the end, because by the time we get to the end, we would have taken over another half of Ukraine, or Ukraine would have taken over a section of Russia. So it's a very odd, it's a very Putin-like solution, which is you carry on to the end, very Russian, and then we will have the ceasefire. Whereas the Americans are saying, and Zelensky, well, let's stop now, have a ceasefire, and get that comprehensive agreement. It's not a small thing, this. It's a very, very big gap between the two negotiating powers. I suppose it means that Donald Trump has nothing else left up his sleeve. Sanctions have not really worked because Russia has carried on. International isolation has not worked because you have President Putin being clapped on American soil. A US president clapping him on a red carpet. So it's a big victory for him. So if you give him all that in advance, how on earth do you get the ceasefire? What's left? You've frozen all the money. 330 billion is frozen in European bank accounts. So what's your sanction now? I mean, I don't know what is left for the allies to do, apart from hope that Putin is fed up. Too many people have died, and let's have a ceasefire.
Yes.
But of course, without the ceasefire, you can't get the agreement. That's the problem.
Yes, of course, Keith. Fascinating what's going on. We now move on to some further developments from the event that happened yesterday. Keith, you are staying with us. Meanwhile, the Russian officials are reflecting on the discussions. Senior Russian officials, including lawmaker Andrei Kilhas, has highlighted the meeting as a win for Russia's peace narrative, despite no agreement being reached on the ongoing war in Ukraine. Former President Dmitry Medvedev stated that the summit demonstrated that negotiations are possible without preconditions. Meanwhile, Kremlin aide Yuri Ushakov revealed that there is no clarity on when the two leaders will meet again. Russian state media spotlighted the summit's global attention and the personal diplomacy between the two leaders. However, some analysts warn that the meeting may have sparked mixed reactions, raising concerns over the future of negotiations. Keith, a lot of analysts, a lot of political analysts are saying that Russia came out of this summit with all the cards in their hand. What are your thoughts on this analysis and Vladimir Putin's new look standing next to Donald Trump on that stage in Alaska?
I think the analysts are absolutely right. This is a massive victory for the Russian president, and which is, of course, why he did this on American soil. If he thought about this, they must have been laughing at us not us, laughing at Trump in the Kremlin. This man is inviting us to go to Alaska with red carpets, and I think that they expected Trump to clap when he got off the plane. But anyway, with all this, and we're not going to give anything in advance. It turns diplomacy on its head, because, you know, when I was negotiating as a Foreign Office Minister for the British government, the ministers and the prime ministers only came in at the end after everything was agreed. We do the heavy slog as junior ministers. And then our leaders would just sign the dotted line and say, you know, this is agreed. So it's a big, big propaganda win for Vladimir Putin. He's wanted by the ICC. Obviously, he wasn't arrested while he was in Alaska because America is not a signatory. It's far away for any members of the public, so nobody could rush up as they did once to Pinochet and say, I arrest you. So he's then safely back in Russia, I think laughing all the way to the bank, because he'll probably say, we'll do something nice for us and we'll do something nice for you. I think these two have met their match. Putin and Trump are in a world entirely of their own. And I don't think that President Trump can fathom what is going through Putin's mind. I thought President Trump looked really disappointed at the press conference. He didn't look happy. He allowed the guest to speak before the host. And then he spoke apparently extempore, without any notes and without any script. And then they walked off while everyone was invited to a press conference. It's actually a joint statement. It was not a press conference. So the press are pretty annoyed. I think what's interesting to watch, Thomas, is the reaction of the base, the Trump base, because they obviously hate the Russians. And therefore, here was the president clapping the Russian leader and going away completely empty-handed. But he's now wrapped himself around Zelensky. So Zelensky can probably save this by some choice words. What's President Trump going to say to President Zelensky? Well, in the discussion I had, they're going to stop the war if the comprehensive agreement is going to be brought into effect. And Zelensky's going to say, what is that comprehensive agreement? And he will say, well, give up 20%, 50%, 40% of your territory, never join NATO, and make sure that you work with the Russians. So it's a complete victory, that. Yes. He's never going to accept that.
Yes, thank you very much for that insight, Keith. You are staying with us. Now, we have been covering global reactions throughout the day, and they continue to pour in after the summit between Putin and Trump, with the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban saying on social media that for years the two biggest nuclear powers traded unfriendly messages, but that has now ended and the world is safer than it was yesterday. Additionally, Hungarian Foreign Minister also said that the war in Ukraine will not be settled on the battlefield, but at the negotiating table, praising both leaders for keeping diplomatic channels open. I want to also say another statement that Peter Szijjártó, the Hungarian foreign minister, said that Hungary has stood by this for 3.5 years, unlike Brussels and pro-war European politicians. I Keith, could you tell us a bit more about Hungary, about Viktor Orban's stance on this war? We've seen statements come out of the European Union condemning Putin's actions in Ukraine, and then you scroll to the bottom of these press releases and you see that statement that Hungary does not associate itself with this statement. Why does Hungary take this stance when it comes to Russia?
From the same cloth. Hungary and these two countries are both always seen to be pro-Russia. It's not that they're against necessarily any wars, they're against this particular war. So from that point of view, it's very, very clear that those two countries are going to be in a position where they are going to support basically anything President Putin says. What's very interesting, Thomas, is that we didn't hear any statements from a woman who has always come out and spoken, Ursula von der Leyen. Do we have any reaction from her? Do we have any reaction from Keir Starmer? Have we heard from President Macron? Have we heard from Chancellor Merkel? No, we haven't. That's what's interesting. They have stood back from saying this has been a waste of time, obviously, because they want to know what's being said. And I would imagine, even though they've had phone calls with President Trump, the full story is only going to emerge on Monday when he speaks to Zelensky. And even though President Zelensky is going to have a different attitude, who knows? He may even be wearing a suit when he gets to the Oval Office. Be very interesting to see whether he is wearing a suit and a tie. When he gets there, what's he going to say? So I think that everyone who is disappointed is standing back from criticizing what's happened. They don't want to say that the emperor has no clothes, because they will be too embarrassed to say this, because obviously Trump is a crucial player in all this. What needs to happen now, actually, if I was Trump, what I would have done is I would have had Zelensky on standby, possibly very near in somewhere like Nevada or somewhere in Canada, the nearest state to Alaska. And as soon as this first section was over, they could have had Zelensky coming and joining them there and then. But it didn't happen. So it's going to happen at some stage. This is what's going to happen next. It's going to be Trump and Zelensky on Monday, of course, because that's what's been promised and advertised.
Yes.
And how on earth are they going to get away with a tripartite meeting? It has to be Trump, Zelensky, and Putin together. But that can only happen when the negotiations are over. They are not going to be the people who are going to negotiate. They're going to be there for the photo call at the end. And
Yes.
that's probably going to be in Kyiv. Who knows?
Yes, Keith, do stay with us. Once again, we have some developments from the battlefield, where Russia has launched 85 Shahed drones and one Alexander M ballistic missile at Ukraine overnight. This is according to Kyiv's Air Force. This attack, which occurred today, targeted frontline areas in several Ukrainian regions. Ukrainian defenses managed to shoot down 61 of the drones. In retaliation, Russia claimed to have intercepted 29 Ukrainian drones during the night, which several downed over regions such as Rostov, Stavropol, Kursk, Belgorod, and the Sea of Azov. This comes just days after the high-profile summit. We need to talk about this, Keith, because obviously there was a backdrop when Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin were sat there, and it said pursuing peace. What does it mean for Putin's mindset that he can continue these military strikes and still push the narrative that Russia wants peace to the American president and to the international media?
Well, I think this has probably been planned before. The Russians didn't arrive back in Moscow and then announce this attack. Any good diplomat, anyone playing chess, and as we know, these are the two best countries in the world at chess in terms of history, India's obviously doing well these days. But they know if you're a chess player, you decide on your next move before you actually do the current move that you're doing. So they decided to do this attack before they actually got to Anchorage. And this was all part of the plan. They obviously couldn't do it while Putin was still on American soil. But as soon as he went back, they started this again. So the most frustrated person of all is probably President Zelensky. But I mean, he spent all this time being frustrated because he knew this was going to happen. And in a sense, it plays into his hands. If you're going to Washington on Monday and Trump is saying, you must make peace, you must give up 20% of your territory. And he will say to Trump, well, how can you trust this man who you were applauding yesterday on a red carpet? But as soon as he landed back in Moscow, he started to attack Ukraine. So what is the meaning of the word pursuing peace? I don't understand it. And remember, pursuing peace was in English. There was no Russian translation on the stage behind. This was an American set. This was an American production.
Yes.
It just so happened the principal actor was Vladimir Putin.
Yes, of course. Keith Vaz, always a pleasure talking to you and getting your insight. Thank you very much for joining us. We now move on once again into the world of economics, where global stocks remained flat on Friday, still close to record highs as investors monitored the high-stakes Trump-Putin talks in Alaska. The Dow edged up to an intraday record, while the S&P 500 and NewsX fell on weakness in tech and financials. Oil prices dropped sharply, with Brent falling to 66.85 a barrel, while gold held steady. Investors remain on standby, awaiting any signs of a ceasefire roadmap. Before we head into the discussion, let's take a look at the live numbers. We're going to start with the US stock market and Dow Jones. Let's have a look at how Wall Street's doing today, given these talks. We can see that the Dow Jones is up 34.86 today, and that's a 0.08% gain. So some confidence gained after these talks. We now move on to the S&P 500, another prominent stock on Wall Street. That's down 18.74 points. So a small loss there of 0.29%. We now move on to the NASDAQ index, which has also seen a small loss in confidence from investors. A loss of 87.69 points or 0.4%. We now move on to Russia's stock market. Let's see how Moscow is trading today. They have a loss of 4.14 or a 0.19% loss today. Minor loss, however. Now let's move on to the oil and gas market, a prominent point of discussion when it comes to trading in Moscow, a huge export and Russia's main export. As we can see, confidence has gained here throughout the day. It has fluctuated. However, we see right now we see a gain of 0.08 or a 2.83% climb there. We now move over to Brent crude oil, a huge export of Russia's, which has lost confidence by 1.02%. That's the Brent crude oil market in the United States. WTI crude oil has also lost a slight amount of confidence today at minus 1.28% or otherwise a 0.8% loss. There we have the numbers of the current related markets as announcements and updates continue to roll out over these Putin and Trump talks. We're now going to move to Sharad Kohli, who's a senior economist, and he joins us live from New Delhi to discuss this further. Sharad, thank you very much for joining us. How do the markets reflect these huge geopolitical updates, for example, like this meeting with Trump and Putin? We know that tariffs and Donald Trump's disrupted the markets. His announcements come with confidence gain and confidence losses in drastic fashion. Sharad, what can you tell us about this?
Well, greetings to you, Thomas, and greetings to the NewsX world viewers. Well, I think the clouds of uncertainty, they still remain on the world markets because this meeting, which happened last evening, was being anticipated very curiously. And somehow the outcome of the meeting is not very favorable for the market. The markets are not rejoicing, I would say, out of the outcome, because nothing on ceasefire, no roadmap, except that next meeting might happen in Moscow where President Trump may visit. No dates have been fixed. So I think the situation is pretty much the same, except for a little bit of bonhomie between Trump and Putin and some photo ops. I don't really see anything major coming out of this market or out of this meeting. So I don't think markets are going to celebrate this. In fact, I would call it as if the meeting has sort of partly failed. You might see markets resigning after the weekend when they open, because the markets are going to open on Monday. You might see a little bit of pressure on the markets where some kind of selling might come, because, as I said, a lot was being anticipated. Stakes were very high. As for the crude market, I would say, the crude, America for that matter, is expecting that probably India will stop buying oil from Russia, which will put pressure on the oil, so which is not going to happen. I don't think India is going to be stopping to buy oil from Russia. Well, President Trump keeps saying that India is one of the largest, customers for the Russian oil. Well, I don't think India is going to stop buying oil. So the crude oil market is not going to rise, because had India stopped, then there would have been a lot of pressure on the oil market in the Middle East and OPEC countries. But that doesn't seem to be happening. Gold, I see, gold and silver, precious metals, I see them rising because the geopolitical situation is not improving anytime soon. We might see aggravated attacks from Russia into Ukraine. You will also see the value of dollar going down because American economy doesn't seem to be in a very good shape. I mean, after the tariffs, you might see dollar coming under pressure to a certain extent. Well, of course, NASDAQ, S&P, and Dow, they have been doing reasonably well. But the question mark is whether it's going to remain like that in the times to come. I see some pressure building up from here, because on 27th August, for example, the 50% tariffs on India, they come into effect. A lot of other tariffs have come into effect. This is going to fuel inflation in America, which is not very good from a geo-economic point of view as well, Thomas, apart from the geopolitical. I think the geo-economic factors would also count on the minds of investors and traders. So I think the road ahead is a bit uncertain. I would say until this whole cloud of tariff clears out, one cannot be very committal about the markets, Thomas.
Sharad, thank you for that such great insight on that topic. Unfortunately, that is all that we have time for, but we will continue to bring you more international news updates from across the world. Thank you for joining us.